There is so much going on in the sports world right now. Obviously, you've got the NHL playoffs, you've got the NBA finals, which we're going to be covering both of those. There's some trades that occurred over the past couple days in the NFL. There's some crazy stuff going on in college football with Brendan Sorsby, who we talked about last week. So we're going to dive right into this here. Starting off, we got to talk about the NHL playoffs. What has occurred in the past two games with the Golden Knights and the Hurricanes is just mind-boggling, right? Vegas has dominated both game 2 and game 3. I mean, game 1 they did as well, but game 2, game 3, the first 40 minutes. If you know what, if the Stanley Cup was only 40 minutes long each game, Vegas would be up 3-0 instead of 2-1 in the finals here. But the last period, the third period, has been brutal for the Golden Knights. Like, unbelievably bad. You know, they've been outscored in the last two games. They've been outscored 7-1 in the third period, and it almost cost them the other night. It cost them game 2. You give up 3 goals. Now, mind you, Vegas is up 4-0 against Carolina in game 3, and you give up 4 goals. 3 goals in 46 seconds, but you give up 4 goals in the third period, and just because of a lucky, crazy bounce, you win in overtime. But something's going on in Vegas. Torts is going to probably get it figured out. If there's one thing that he's good at, it's figuring out goalie situations, because he's had some crazy ones over the years. But I can't wrap my head around what is wrong with them in the third period. Like, again, something like they go from completely dominating the pace of the game to Carolina looks like they have a 3-0 lead when they're down 4 goals. Like, it just does not. And it's not a situation of like they're sitting on a lead, because Vegas is actively trying to score. It's just the last 2 games in the third period, they've just really struggled. And I don't know if they're tired or whatever, but they got to get it figured out, because if Carolina, which Carolina historically this season has gotten off to fast start, if they get off to a fast start and you're playing like that in the third period, you're going to lose. And we've seen, whether it's the NHL, whether it's the NBA, we've seen teams have these big leads, you know, early in the series, and we get to game 6 or game 7, and if that comes down to it, Carolina may come back and win the series. I don't think they do. Like I said, I think Torts gets this whole thing figured out, and I think Vegas wins game 4, and I think Vegas wins game 5. Just a nice gentleman's sweep. But like I said, what has transpired over the last 2 games for Vegas is so fascinating. And, you know, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know what is going on, but they'll get it figured out. Game 2 was kind of an eye-opening experience of like, what, like, you give up, you know, the game-tying goal, you go into overtime, and Carolina scores essentially right away. Like, you think you get that figured out game 3. Obviously, they didn't. But we'll see what happens over the next week. Like I said, I think it's still Vegas in 5. Now, switching a gear to the NBA, since we're talking about, you know, Stanley Cup finals, all that kind of stuff. NBA, wild stuff going on. The Knicks are on the cusp of their first championship in over 50 years. I mean, I think everybody's cheering for the Knicks. Even if you're not a Knicks fan, I'm a 76ers fan, and I just want to see it for the fans, which we'll be talking about Knicks fans later in the episode here. But the Knicks look really good. They were down 14 game 1, came back, won. Obviously, game 2, they had the play at the end of the game when Wemby had an opportunity to win the game and ended up winning by 1. But the city, we got to talk about the city. The city is being shut down right now because fans are going insane. Rightfully so. It's no different than Philly sports fans, you know, when the Eagles win a Super Bowl. But fans are going insane right now. You also have political figures that are coming to New York City. So the mayor of New York is going to actually be attending Game 3 of the NBA Finals. The president of the United States, Donald Trump, is also going to be attending the NBA Finals. And because you have so many political figures, as well as an event that is so, in public eye, everybody wants to be around Madison Square Garden. Literally, it seems like every single person on social media is in New York City right now. There's some precautions that are taking place more than normal. I mean, you have events at Madison Square Garden all the time. Obviously, they're going to have a lot of security as it is. But because of having the president, having a mayor, all these kind of figures, these famous celebrities, the city has essentially shut down the area, the blocks surrounding Madison Square Garden with these brand new, like state of the art fences to keep people out that, don't have tickets to the event, to the game. And they actually are creating, and I get this because of the political figures that are going, as well as it being such a polarizing event, a big event where, like I said, all eyes are on Madison Square Garden. They've actually created these, it's essentially like a TSA line to check in. And they were telling fans to get to the game super early because these TSA style lines to get into the stadium could take you about 2 hours to get in, depending on what time you arrive to the stadium and whatnot. So I just it baffles me in a good way. I mean, you have to do these precautions, with the individuals that are attending. I get it. I totally get it. But could you imagine? Now, mind you, also, I didn't even say this, but some of these tickets, actually all the tickets, are just astronomically, insanely priced, right? Like you've got Cam Scatabo going on Instagram on his story saying, "Hey, like if anybody's got a ticket, I'll buy one for $500 or best offer." And it's hysterical because, a normal sporting event, $500, sure, yeah, that's not bad. Talk about $6,000 or $7,000 just for a nosebleed for Game 3, not even Game 4. Like I would understand it to an extent. Game 4, New York's up 3-0. Could the Knicks sweep the Spurs? Like I get the whole storyline with a Game 4 where you're spending $6,000 or $7,000 for a nosebleed, but we're talking about Game 3, not Game 4, Game 3. And people are buying these tickets, 5, 6, 7,000. But if you want a courtside seat, or not even a courtside, just row A, so you're technically like, I don't know, 5 rows behind courtside. I mean, you're spending $100,000. Like people have their tickets listed for 130, 120,000, which again, people are buying. Not me, but people are buying. And so could you imagine being somebody that you just spent $120,000 and you have no idea that, all this stuff outside of the stadium is being set up, and you arrive to New York City at 2.5 hours before tip, and you're standing outside in a line for 2-3 hours and you missed the opening tip just because, all of these precautions are being set up, which again, like I said, you need to have it. You need to have it. So like, it is what it is in that aspect. The one part that is a little, I can understand where fans could be a little upset is, you're not really allowed to have watch parties outside of the stadium. Just because, like I said, all the individuals that are attending, I don't know how well they're going to be able to police that. I think they'll be able to do it better Game 3 than Game 4 if the Knicks win. Because if the Knicks sweep the Spurs, New York will be absolute pandemonium. And I was a big Knicks in 6 kind of guy, but how the first 2 games have gone down and how Jalen Brunson, as well as, Josh Hart, like Karl Anthony Towns, like they have dominated the entire basketball game. Now, like I said, I know game one, the Spurs got off to a hot start and they have that ability. But the careless mistakes that the Spurs have been making, specifically game two, there were so many careless turnovers. Wemby looks like he's, kind of like deer in the headlights game two. And I get it. Like, you're a young rising superstar. It's okay. I'm not saying, the moment's too big or anything like that, which it might be, but it's okay if that is the case, because the Spurs are a young team. They're built this is truly like, they're kind of ahead of their championship window, but they're going to be good for a long time. And the Knicks are just it pains me because, there is a former brief 76ers on the Knicks, 76ers player on the Knicks roster. And I say very brief. But the Knicks are really good and they are built to win now, especially with the veteran leadership that they have. And Jalen Brunson has played unbelievable basketball over the last 8 quarters, let alone the entire postseason. I don't really think the guy's had a bad game. Sure, maybe he struggled against the 76ers for a half, but the 76ers had no chance to win that series against the Knicks. As much as me, a biased 76ers fan, wanted to think that they had an opportunity, nah, that was never happening. So with that, though, like I said, I was a big Knicks in 6 kind of guy. No. Give me the Knicks with an actual 4-0 sweep. And again, we'll see it here tonight, June 8th, tonight of the recording, to see if the Knicks can beat the Spurs, which I think that they will tonight, especially because the game's in New York City. The best thing that could have possibly happened for the Knicks was to go into San Antonio and split. If you can split, great. But the fact that they swept swept the Spurs in San Antonio, game 1, game 2, I don't see the Spurs winning a game in New York City. And if they do, good for them, because I would not touch that bet with a 10-foot pole. Now we're going to shift away, though, from basketball and jump into some football stuff, because there's been some crazy things, crazy storylines, crazy trades, and a wild situation with Brendan Sorsby that we touched on last week. But we're going to start with the NFL side of things. The Philadelphia Eagles traded A.J. Brown to the New England Patriots. This was the worst kept secret. It's been talked about for the past 6 months. If you go even further back, there have been talks that, A.J. Brown wasn't happy for the past basically year. But finally, June 1st was the day that the Eagles were going to trade A.J. Brown, and it finally came out. The Eagles got a first round in 2028 and a 5th round pick in 2027. Here's the deal. That's a great trade for the Eagles in the aspect of truly A.J. Brown was not happy in Philly. Also, you look at the Eagles receiving room, as well as the offense that they're going to be running. I think this is a part that not a lot of people talk about, is that the West Coast style of offense that the Eagles are going to be utilizing under Sean Mannion doesn't really fit a big body possession receiver that's not going to create a lot of separation with vertical speed. A.J. Brown, one of the best receivers in the NFL. There's no doubt about it. And I think he would have been successful in Sean Mannion's offense. But you look at the prototypical West Coast style receiver is a Devontae Smith, is a Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, who the Eagles brought in, Malachi Lemon from USC, who the Eagles drafted. Like, you look at the receivers that the Eagles have right now, and none of them have the similar body type of A.J. Brown. They are all Dontavian Wicks. Like, there's another guy, just a speedster, vertical. The West Coast offense is going to utilize a lot of under center stuff, so you're going to get a lot of play action, which Eagles fans have been wanting for a long time. And with that too, it's going to open up the run game, and it's going to put a lot of, it's going to take off a lot of pressure off the Eagles' offensive line, because you're going to have Saquon Barkley essentially coming downhill with a 6-yard head start running instead of taking the handoff. Defensive lines already, negated whatever positive push the Eagles' offensive line has already had. So in theory, the Eagles' offensive line should be a lot more effective, which helps the run game, which in turn also helps the pass game because it's going to open up the play action pass, and the Eagles are going to be able to take more downfield shots, which we didn't necessarily see that often last year. But going back to A.J. Brown, it's come out that, and he actually confirmed it himself, he was the anonymous source that was leaking stuff to the media, different storylines of, hey, he's not happy, this thing with Jalen Hurts or whatever it may be. But he was the guy that was talking to the media. That was the anonymous source over the past couple months. And his reasoning for doing so, now I love A.J. Brown to death, but he said his reasoning for doing so was to motivate his teammates. If you want to motivate your teammates, you're in the same locker room as them, go walk over and say, hey, you need to be playing better. Which, here's the thing. I don't think the Eagles offense necessarily played bad last year. Yes, there were times where they were ineffective and they were a very roller coaster up and down team, but they were never bad. But doing something like that is something that can easily destroy a locker room, which I think, as we saw this season progress, I think that was the case. And truthfully, I think Brandon Graham coming back wasn't so much about himself. I think it was more of a veteran voice to stay on Jalen Hurts' side. And also, because you're Brandon Graham, people are going to look up to you. And if you say, hey, Jalen Hurts is doing the right thing, people are going to follow what he says, because as much as people say, hey, we don't look at the media, we don't look at the storylines, we don't look at what's happening on social media, they do. Everybody does. And when you hear the same storyline being talked about in the media, Jalen Hurts isn't a good quarterback, Jalen Hurts can't throw a good deep ball, Jalen Hurts doesn't want to throw the ball to A.J. Brown, whatever it may be, people start to believe it, whether you want to or not. Subconsciously, it's in your head. So having a voice like a Brandon Graham to say, hey, Jalen Hurts is not the problem, offense is going to get figured out, to those defensive players, I do think there was more to it than just Brandon Graham wanting to come back, which, again, I think Brandon Graham was effective in his, handful of snaps that he got a game, but I think there was more to that than just, hey, we need more depth, which they did at the time. So I think that it's going to be a trade that will benefit both the Patriots and the Eagles. You get rid of that unfortunate situation with the Eagles, and get rid is not the right word, but a true Eagles fan appreciates A.J. Brown's time with Philly because he was one of the most dominant receivers in the NFL throughout his entire career in Philly. And he helped the Eagles win a Super Bowl. So there's obviously some Eagles fans that are really upset about it, but in time, I think they'll get over it. But again, on the Patriots flip side, it's a great trade for the Patriots. They didn't have that guy. They didn't have the guy that Drake May could throw to. Now they do. And they've got a really talented coaching staff and a really talented defense. So the Patriots are going to be a good team for years to come, as we've seen outside of maybe 2.5 seasons. But I don't think anybody's going to truly lose that trade, which is what you want. Side note, fun little fact about this, though. The Eagles and Patriots are actually doing joint practices again together during training camp. So we'll get to see an A.J. Brown versus Quinyon Mitchell or an A.J. Brown versus Cooper DeJean matchup numerous times, potentially, in August, which is super exciting because that is truly like an iron sharpens iron kind of thing. And we'll really get to see how the Eagles DBs stack up because they still are really young. Quinyon Mitchell's one of the best DBs in the NFL. Cooper DeJean kind of does it all now with the Eagles secondary situation. He could be playing a little safety, could be still playing a little nickel. Wouldn't be shocked if they also pushed him outside as maybe a boundary corner. But we'll kind of see what the Eagles defense and Vic Fangio gets drawn up. But we're staying in the football world because I just cannot believe this. Brendan Sorsby. So last week when Nate was on, we were talking about Brendan Sorsby and the possibility of him, actually the very highly likelihood of him losing his eligibility because the NCAA had already ruled that he would not be eligible, and he lost his eligibility for betting on games for Indiana while actively being a member of Indiana's roster. Now, if you guys didn't listen to last week's episode, or you haven't seen in the news, Brendan Sorsby's defense, one of his main defenses for that, and arguing why it's not a big deal, was he wanted to be more connected to his teammates because he wasn't playing. He was a redshirt freshman. Now, this man allegedly, we like to use the word allegedly, put over 40 bets on Indiana during this time frame and spent allegedly about $90,000. We talked about it. Like I said, we talked about it. I thought it was a pretty cut and dry case. You can't do that. You just can't do that. However, the courts ruled today. Ruling came out, shocked everybody. Brendan Sorsby won his appeal. He is eligible for this upcoming season for Texas Tech. Now, the one penalty we'll say, he has to sit out the first 2 games of the season. Who is Texas Tech playing the first 2 games of the season? I believe it is Abilene Christian. It might actually be Texas State, but then also Oregon State. You don't really need Brendan Sorsby for either one of those games. Sure, maybe it hurts his Heisman chances or whatever, but I think that's the least of his and Texas Tech's concerns right now. A big concern for them, and I don't know how, you know what, honestly, at this point, they'll probably figure out a way because, truthfully, the NCAA is kind of turned into the Wild West where any sort of ruling they make just gets absolutely triumphed in the court of law. But the Big 12 is talking about boycotting Texas Tech over the Brendan Sorsby situation. And what do I mean by that? Well, I guess there's a bunch of teams in the Big 12 and their athletic directors and their coaching staffs are talking about if Brendan Sorsby is allowed to play, we're not going to play them. We're not going to put them on our schedule. We're not going to play them. This could create absolute pandemonium in college football. This is a situation we've never seen before because up until just a couple hours ago, if you bet on sports, specifically if you bet on college football, especially your team that you're playing on, you're never playing college football again. I mean, look at Pete Rose. Like this is literally the Pete Rose situation, and Pete Rose is not in the MLB Hall of Fame, and he's one of the greatest players of all time, just solely due to the fact that he bet on his team to win, mind you. It was never negative. It's the same thing. Brendan Sorsby bet on his team to win, whether it's player props, wherever the case may be. It was never negative, but it's just something that you just can't do. Everybody knows you can't do it. It's literally right there in the rules that you cannot do this. Still did it, though. And you know what? It really isn't facing any sort of consequences. Sure, again, you lose 2 games, maybe you lose a chance at a Heisman, but still, you are playing college football despite doing all this. Now, mind you, like, where I get completely baffled with this whole situation is just a couple years ago, Ohio State lost out on the Micah Parsons race. They had to self-report themselves just because he walked across the stage on College game day. And Ohio State's like, you know what? If it comes to light, we're going to get in trouble. We're going to get some sort of sanction from the NCAA. Let's just report it ourselves. Call it a day. Yeah, you lose out on Micah Parsons. Micah Parsons goes to Penn State, one of the greatest players in college football history. Now, transform to today's day of college football. Like, how did we get here? right? Like, how did we get here? And people are going to blame NIL, and I get that to an extent, but it's like the NCAA can't enforce any of their rules because it instantly gets shot down in the courts, and the courts rule in favor of everybody else, which is why, hey, if the Big 12 says, you know what, we're not playing Texas Tech, and the NCAA comes back and says, you know, we want you guys to, all they'll do is just go to the courts, and the Big 12 will probably win in that situation just with the way that things are going. And if I was them, I wouldn't disagree. I mean, this completely changed the landscape of college football today and college athletics in general. And now, does it open up the can of worms? And this is a question that we'll continue to ask. Does it open up the can of worms for athletes to bet on themselves, bet on their teams, bet on their friends? Like, what is stopping a guy now, whatever school it is, whatever sport, we'll just stick with football here. What is stopping a incoming freshman, you know, true freshman, whatever, it doesn't even matter what age, but what is stopping somebody from, hey, if I play for XYZ school and I know my buddy has a hurt ankle, whatever it is, and he's not going to rush for 80 yards and the prop is 80 and a half, what is stopping them from taking the under? What is stopping them from, you know, sure, you're betting on your team to win. What is stopping, you know the game plan, right? Like, hey, we're coming in this week, we're going to throw the ball a lot. Okay, I'm going to take my team to win, and then I'm going to take player props of, you know, the quarterback to throw over on passing. Like, what is stopping a player from doing that? Because at the end of the day, it's going to come back to the courts, and the courts are going to just rule in favor of the players, as we've seen. So I think we are seeing a monumental, and people may not even realize it, we are seeing a monumental situation in college football, and really, like I said, in college sports in general, that this is going to change everything. People are going to remember June 8th, 2026, Brendan Sorsby versus the NCAA, or whatever they're calling the lawsuit situation thing. And this is going to be a pivotal point in college athletics. You know, there's two paths that we can go down. And I think we're going down the wrong one right now. And again, I've been a huge advocate of, hey, like, NIL is great. You know, you need more opportunities for players because not everybody plays in the NFL. So if you can make as much money as you possibly can in 4 or 5 years playing college football or any sport, go and do it. Go and do it. However, what we're seeing is the wrong way to go about it, of like these massive, and I hate using the words like slush funds, but like, Johnny wants a NIL deal from Earnhardt Ford or whatever dealership, car dealership, whatever, and they pay him $250,000. That is great. Joe Schmo wants to give a quarterback $250,000 to come play for your school, and just because, maybe not what NIL was intended for. But it's just the way it is, and you know, coaches right now have to adapt. I'm sure a lot of coaching staffs are kind of freaking out over this situation with Brendan Sorsby, and I'm sure they're still telling their players, "Hey, you can't do this." And I think we're going to see. I truly think the Big 12 is going to make their own ruling, because you cannot tell ASU, hey, you have to play Texas Tech. ASU can find another opponent. All these other Big 12 schools can find other opponents. And the Big 12 can change their rules and say, hey, yeah, sure, you know, you had to play 8 conference games or whatever, 9 conference games, but guess what? This year, nah, you don't have to. And there's nothing Texas Tech or Brendan Sorsby could do about that. Now, it sucks for everybody else on Texas Tech's roster. But if you're Brendan Sorsby in that situation, then you just say, hey, I'm going to the supplemental draft, I'm going to the NFL. Like, sorry, guys. I don't think that's going to happen, but I do think, like I said, I think most Big 12 teams are going to come together and say, hey, we're not playing Texas Tech if Brendan Sorsby's not playing, or excuse me, Brendan Sorsby is playing, because it's just, it's not right. It is truly not right. But nonetheless, I don't think this situation's over, and I think we're going to see a lot more stuff be talked about. I mean, Congress is getting involved, not necessarily with this, but it's going to help cover all this with the Save College Football Act. Actually, I think it's called the Save College Sports Act. We talked about it last week. So that's another thing that could potentially also affect this entire situation with Brendan Sorsby going forward. But anyway, I mean, like I said, it's not something that's going to be figured out overnight. This is something that's going to take the entire offseason. And it could be a situation where week 1 and then all the Big 12 teams start pulling out. And now Texas Tech doesn't have a schedule outside of, 2 or 3 non-conference games. Maybe they play FCS schools. Like that's going to be what it boils down to. But anyway, we are going to my favorite part of Sports Slice. So I know we've talked and covered the NBA and the Knicks, but this week's Slice of Unbelievable is none other than the Knicks fans themselves. Now, we've had NHL teams, NBA teams, even professional boxing organizations be a part of the Slice of Unbelievable, but this is the first time we've had a group of fans as the Slice of Unbelievable. Now, as stated before, it's been over 50 years since the Knicks have won an NBA Finals. In fact, as of Monday, June 8th, it has been 19,388 days since the Knicks have won an NBA Finals. And I think that wait is going to be over here in just a few short days, as I've said before. But Knicks fans, and this is coming from a Philly sports fan, diehard Philly sports fan. I've been in Eagles parades, Super Bowl parades. Like, I've seen it all. What is coming out on social media of these fans rioting in a good way? You hate to use the word rioting, but what is coming out on social media of these fans climbing the light poles and like basically tearing New York City down in a very more polite way than Philly sports fans is ridiculous. And maybe it's because I am a Philly sports fan and I'm so used to seeing the Eagles fans do it, but seeing another fan base not only match the intensity of Philly sports, but some people may say kind of increasing it and surpassing it is insane to watch. And getting to see this, like essentially first person through social media of people are flipping cars. And here's the thing. It's not even game 4. They haven't even won the finals yet. This fan base deserves it. They've been through so much, and you're finally seeing everybody's emotions come out. And again, we've only seen 2 games played, 3 after the recording of this episode. But, I mean, it's just going to get even more intense. And if they go and sweep San Antonio and win the series in New York, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if the Knicks just have their parade that night. Like, the entire city of New York, millions of people are going to be on the streets. Tens of millions of people, I should say, are going to be on the streets celebrating and being a part of it. I would not want to be in New York City when the Knicks win the NBA Finals, just because you're not going to be able to move. It is going to be an absolute madhouse. And it's not going to be a thing where it's like, hey, 3 o'clock in the morning rolls around and everybody's going home. No, it's going to be like that for days. And I can't fathom how traffic is going to be the day after the Knicks win the finals, because people are still going to be out celebrating on the streets. There's no doubt about it. They say, New York is like the city that never sleeps. So it's never going to sleep after the Knicks win NBA finals. I mean, these fans are just going to be insane. And I'm all for it. Because like I said before, these fans deserve it. They've been through a lot. They've been through so much heartbreak. And it's enjoyable. And I know it's going to sound weird because I'm a Philly sports fan, but it's enjoyable to see another fan base so passionate be on the cusp of the ultimate goal that every sports fan wants to see, that being that their team winning a championship. So, again, this week, you got to give it to the Knicks fans. I mean, a little round of applause here for Knicks fans. And hopefully the Knicks pull it off, because if the Knicks fans and the Knicks organization gets this close, they could taste the finals trophy. they get this close and somehow San Antonio wins this series, it will be one of the most devastating events in North American sports history. I mean, it might be the most devastating event in North American sports history because I don't know really what would be able to top this other than the Falcons blowing their 28-3 lead against the Patriots. Because as said before, I mean, it seems like the entire country is rooting for the Knicks. I'm rooting for the Knicks. I know so many people that are like, hey, I don't like the Knicks, but their fans make me want to cheer for the Knicks. And I'm in the same boat. I have nothing against San Antonio. I think San Antonio is a great organization, one of the most historic organizations with Greg Popovich. Shout out, Greg. Another little round of applause for Greg. But it's Knicks in 4. And with that, we will see you next week on Sports Slice. We got a couple fun guests coming up here. So you guys will want to stay tuned for that. Peace.